Welcome to Biz Help for You with host Candy Messer. Entrepreneurs like to focus on the big picture, like profitability, success, and a smooth-running organization. But there always seems to be those little things like taxes, employee compensation, laws, regulations, and more. Now you can get the answers you need in one place. Join us today as we break it all down for you. Now, here's your host, Candy Messer.
Hello and welcome to Biz Help for You with Candy Messer. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the topic of our last episode, How to Master the Art of Virtual Presentations, informative. If you are unable to join us and would like to listen to the show, links can be found on our YouTube and Facebook pages, as well as multiple favorite podcast platforms. And if you'd like to receive notifications on when our podcasts have been uploaded, please like and subscribe. And if there are topics you'd find beneficial or questions you have, please feel free to reach out to me at media@abandp.com. Now let's learn a little bit about our guest today. Jeremy Streten is a founder and chief executive officer at Business Legal Lifecycle. He's the author of the Amazon #1 best-selling book, The Business Legal Lifecycle. And the Business Legal Lifecycle worldwide's aim is to provide access to legal advice for all small to medium-sized businesses around the world. Jeremy lives in Brisbane, Australia, a dad of 2 awesome kids, and loves to learn and help business owners achieve their goals. So welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Candy.
I'm glad to have you. I am actually very excited about this topic too, because it's so important for business owners to, handle all the legal things in their business as well as other things that they are focused on. But before I get into questions that I have for you, I'd love for you to tell me just a little bit more about yourself and how did you even get into the legal field?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Candy. So, it was really around, when I left school, many years ago now, 25 years ago, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew just enough about computers to be dangerous. So everyone thought that I should go into information technology, learn programming. I hated that. I was just talking to my business mate yesterday about the fact that that they required you to do the hardest maths that you have in school here that you do over 2 years in 6 months. And I just couldn't do it. Maths was just not my strong suit. So I kind of looked around for different things, and I did a couple of law subjects at uni, and I really loved it. It really hit with what I wanted to do. So I went all in, and I went all in and did a law degree. Started practicing law, got a job in a law firm here in Brisbane, and really loved it. And after 8 years, decided I could do it myself, and started my own law firm, and that led to where I am today. So it was really, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I think it's one of those things that a lot of people don't realize, that it's okay not to know what you want to do when you come out of school, and you eventually find what it is that is your passion and where you want to help people. So that's kind of how I got into it. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I want to start first with talking about the importance of business owners getting legal advice for their businesses. So let's touch on that to start, because it's so important just to, have people understand you don't just start a business and ignore the legal side.
That's right. And a lot of people do that. And something that I want to change. And the main reasons that I found that people do that is because they don't want to think about the legal side. They see it as this big, scary, ephemeral thing where lawyers use big words. Like I just used ephemeral, just calling myself out on that. They use big words that people don't know what they mean, and that it sounds really complicated. They see it as a cost, not an investment, and they see it as something that I'll just fix later. And so what I've found, Candy, is that people, they do that they kind of jump at just, how do I just go forward and I don't have to worry about this legal thing. I don't want to worry about all this stuff. And what ends up happening is that things that, if they took a proactive approach to solving, become bigger issues down the track. And so one of the things that I've really seen is that if people be proactive and they stop their legal risks before they arise, they will actually save themselves a lot of money that they'll never know that they've saved, but they will. Right. And so it's around helping them actually identify what those legal risks are. And so they can plug those holes early on so they don't become big things down the track.
Mhm. I agree. I think I've seen a couple reasons why people also don't go into, the legal planning per se. And one side of it is a lot of times people didn't even intend to start a business, right? They had a hobby maybe that they were doing, and over time it became something where they were generating more income, and it turned into a business, and they don't necessarily think of the legal side of things. And the
Mm,
other time I've seen some situations really is when it's like friends that start a business together, right? And everyone thinks everything's hunky dory. Who needs to have an operating agreement or, any of this stuff, because it's all going to work out. And then unfortunately, I have seen where there's misunderstandings because one person has one interpretation of something and someone else has a different one. And then conflict arises. And then here we are with, people splitting because of differences. So those are some of the situations that I have seen personally. I'm sure there's other things too, but it just shows you that no matter where you are in your business, you really should think about this, because down the line, something may impact you that you're not thinking about right now. And we don't even know what we don't know. So it's good to talk to an attorney who can help you through that.
exactly. And I think actually that thing that you said about around, what's the agreement is actually something that it applies in all stages of the business. Yeah, we have 13
Mhm.
phases in the life cycle. And I see that as something that people don't do, whether it's bringing on employees when they're going into business with someone, or they might be just starting out with their clients and customers. They don't
Mhm.
they don't define the terms of the agreement. And what ends up happening is that people change, as you say. Like, if you told me 10 years ago or 11 years ago when I started my business that I'd be here with a business that is have a global reach, that I'd be doing
Mhm.
podcasts and all the rest of that, I would have laughed at you, because that just wasn't in where I wanted to be. And so, what people need to realize is that things do change. That's
Mhm.
perfectly okay. In fact, that's normal. Life would be boring if it didn't change. But because it changes, because that happens, you need to document what happens and what the basic agreement is with everyone, so that when it does change, you can move forward. And as I said, that happens with business partners, that happens with team members, it happens with clients, it even happens with investors and all that kind of thing, because you want to make sure that you're aligned. So
Mhm.
yeah, one thing I'm very big on is whilst people don't like legal agreements, I get why they're boring and they're long and all the rest of that. I get it. They're there to protect you in case something
Mhm.
happens down the track. So yeah, I think it's a really important thing that people miss. And just putting your head in the sand isn't going to solve anything.
Right. And obviously, I'm based in the United States. Here in Australia, people could be listening from all over. And so there's different, legal situations, obviously, in different countries. But in terms of maybe just even entity formation, what would you say to someone who maybe is starting a business and maybe needs to think about, should I become an entity, or should I, stay as a sole proprietor or like a partnership? Like, what would you say to somebody who maybe thinks they may need to look into this, but they're not sure what they should be doing?
Yeah. So great question. And I'll address the first part just about the different laws in different countries, if that's okay first.
Mm-hmm.
What I found, and one of the reasons why I've expanded my business overseas, is that especially in the English speaking world, if we say that, or the parts of the world that the English colonized, I was going to say conquered. I suppose it is conquered and colonized
Right.
in a lot of senses. The law is very, very similar. In fact, even
Mm.
in other countries, the law is very similar. So at a broad level, and that's where I work in, is at the broad advice level and broad information level, it's all very, very similar. So
Mm.
to answer your specific question, Candy, unless you're just having a side business, you should always set up some sort of entity to run your business. If
Mm.
you're just trying to, if you've got a job and you just want to, do something on the side and that you don't think will become a business, then you can do that as a sole trader. But in
Mm-hmm.
every other situation, you want to set up an entity, because that's an entity that's separate from you. That if you get sued, that entity is the one that gets sued. It protects
Mm-hmm.
you and your assets. But one thing I will say on that is, even if you are as a sole trader to start with, you want to be thinking through when that changes, because it will change, just as I
Mm.
said before.
Right.
This project of the business legal life cycle started as a side project in my law firm, and has now expanded to be its own beast, as it were, its own entity, its own business that's all around the world now. And so it will expand. So when it does, and you need to go and set up that separate entity. So and as far as how to do that goes, and what's the right one for you, it comes back to something that I think a lot of people miss, and it's at the time that you're setting it up, what is it that you want to achieve? What's your goal? Because don't go to, we call it barbecue advice here. So you go to a barbecue and you talk to your friends and they say, oh, I started my business up here and my lawyer said this, or my accountant said this. That will work for them and it might work for you too, but your circumstances are different. Everyone's circumstances are different. So you need to go and get advice from an attorney, lawyer. They're the same thing. We call them lawyers. You guys call them attorneys. Accountant. Get advice from them about what it is that is the best structure for you. Do it right in the beginning so that you don't have the problems down the track.
That's so important. So thinking through situations that come across for business owners and the problems that they may be facing, and why maybe they're thinking, I'm not going to go to an attorney because, I don't need to have this or whatever. But what are really some of the misconceptions that they may have of why they don't need to really follow through and have, a conversation with an attorney when really they should, because they don't understand what they don't understand?
I think that the biggest one for me, Candy, is that it's the people who they think that they can just solve the problem later. So I see this so often. It's really scary actually for me as a lawyer, where they go, I'll do this and I'll ask for forgiveness later, or I'll do this and I'll just solve it later. Now that can work. The listeners may be thinking to themselves, well, I've done that and that's worked out, and it can work. It's just that often it doesn't work, and often it can cost you a lot of money to find that out. So that's the one where I see the scariest scenarios happening. Part of the reason I created the Lifecycle was I had a client who had a property investment business, and they ended up losing $1 million of other people's money.
Oh, wow.
All because they didn't get advice about how to structure their business and how to go about certain steps. And they thought they could just ask for advice later on. And it just turned into a disaster. They ended up losing their own, all their money. They ended up losing all these other people's money. And so, whilst it might work in some situations, it doesn't work in all. And so therefore the risk that you're running is you could lose everything.
Well, and I think that's where it's important for people to understand too, the cost of having that consultation or having the legal documents drawn up really is an investment. It's, don't look at it as an expense, but it's protection. And had that person that you just talked about said, yes, I'm willing to invest whatever it is, whether it's a few hundred, a few $1,000s, whatever that may be, it's still in the long run is, expert advice for your specific situation that is going to help you, down the line. So yes, I agree. Don't look at it as an expense, but look at it as an investment that's, for the benefit of your business.
Absolutely. And that mindset shift is something that people need to make. It is an investment, so you need to make sure that you're spending the money and investing the money in the right way.
Exactly. So if someone's hearing this now and saying, okay, I really do need to find an attorney who can help me, with everything that I need to really plan out for my business, but I'm not sure who is really the right fit for me, how would you suggest that they find a good lawyer for their business?
Yeah, this is a really great question. Something that a lot of people come and ask us. I actually have some resources on my website that outline this, but I'll give the short a summary of what that says. So the first thing is it's an art, not a science. You need to the first thing I'd say is look for people that have given advice to people that and that they know, like, and trust. The old trusted advisor formula. You want someone who you like, and you trust. So who in your network has a lawyer / attorney that they like, that gets them the right advice. Then you really want to sit down and really get the knowledge for yourself about what needs to happen. So, a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing. And I'm certainly not suggesting people go and try and do it all themselves. But finding out what you need to do, or what you think you need to do, puts you on the same level as the attorney when you go and meet with them. So really educating yourself is the second step. And the third step is to go and interview them. These, at the end of the day, these are professionals who are going to be working for you. So go and interview them. And one of the big red flags that I see anyway is if a lawyer, if you go to engage a lawyer and they want to charge you on time, and they say, oh, I'll act for you and it's going to be $400 an hour or $300 an hour, and they can't really tell you how much it's going to cost. That's a red flag for me, because they should know how much time they're going to be spending or what the value is that they're providing. So I think that if they just say, I'm going to charge them this much, and I think it's going to cost between $2,000 and $5,000, that should be a red flag that they don't really know what they're doing, and that you either need to know that and be comfortable with that, or that you want to go somewhere else. And it's one of the beautiful things about what we do in our law firm, and what a lot of other lawyers have embraced, which is around the fixed fee concept, is that if you're charging a fixed fee, you know what work goes into it. You know what needs to be done for the client. So they're probably the three main things, Candy, that I see is around really who in your network do people trust, who the time costing, and really thinking through what questions and what knowledge can you give yourself to make sure that you get the right advice.
Perfect. Well, I know you talked about, and I read in your bio that you have a business legal life cycle. So what is that?
Yep. So that's where I put through really that matter I mentioned before, where I had a client lose $1 million of other people's money. I had another one where a client almost lost $2 million of their own money, all because they didn't get legal advice. And I was really frustrated at the time. So I developed this life cycle. And basically what I did is I studied the 5,000 odd businesses that I'd acted for over the years. And I worked out, when did they do things well? When did they do things poorly? And mapped out the journey of a business over 13 phases. And so, the 13 phases takes you through from startup and conceiving your idea all the way through to sale of the business. And the idea is to put all of the parts of the business in place over the first 10 phases to build up your business so that you can sell it at its peak. And then after that, then there's retirement and winding up. But it's to give business owners the knowledge that they need to know what they're doing in their business from a legal perspective.
Well, like I said, it's so important because, again, when you start your business, you are thinking of that immediate situation, right? Not necessarily thinking like, well, in 20 years, I'm going to want to retire, or 50 years, or whatever it is, or I might have my kids come into the business, or I might sell to an employee. Like, there's all these different things to think through, and really just start planning and putting some ideas down. And it doesn't mean things can't change, obviously, right? But at least you've got something in place where you're protecting yourself. And again, if you've got like a partner or someone in there, you've got your operating agreement, that everyone understands what happens if, right? Or planning, what happens if you have an accident and you can't run your business or something too, and putting all of that into place. And a lot of times people don't think about that, especially, again, if they're a sole proprietor, they just started a hobby, turn into a business, and they don't think through all of these legal things. So I love that you're talking about from basically start to finish, like all the things in between, and what should you be thinking about?
Yeah, and people, I get why people don't want to think about that, especially something happens to you. Most people don't want to think about that. At the end of the day, though, if you don't put something in place, then the law comes in and tells you what has to happen. And one of the things I've learned is you got 50 states in America, there's 6 states here in Australia, and in England there's 3 or 4 different countries with different rules around all these things. And I was going to say England, it's the United Kingdom, has 3 or 4 countries with different rules, and so you can never be across all of the different things that might happen. So you want to put the procedure in place to protect you and protect your family going forward. And so it's really important that people do that. And as I said before, the putting your head in the sand approach doesn't work. It just causes more problems in the long term.
So if someone is thinking like, okay, I do know I need to start planning for the future too. Like, I've done okay. Like, I talked to an attorney when I first started my business and things were fine, but haven't really thought like the long-term plan. Like, what should they be thinking about in terms of what's going to happen with their business in the future?
Yeah, I think the first thing to do is to really think through and write down your goal. There's lots of great tools out there that help you to work that out. Where do you see yourself in 10 years, 5 years, 3 years, 1 year? Like, let's start from the furthest out, and then come back to the where you see yourself in a year. Again,
Mhm.
knowing that will change. It's inevitable. It always
Right.
does, and that's perfectly okay.
Mhm.
Some people think, oh no, it's going to change, so I won't bother doing it. No, you need to do it now. So it's really, you know, you can work with someone to do that. There's lots of great coaches out there that can help you to work those goals out. But it's really to sit down and think through where is it that you want to be, and
Mhm.
then everything flows from that. It's one of the things that I see lawyers don't do a lot of, which is actually asking that question to begin with. People come in with a problem, and they don't actually ask, what do you want to achieve with this?
Mhm.
What's your goal out of this? We tend to just dive straight into where we see it going, where we would go. And so it's really, before you go get any advice, before you go and do any of that stuff, it's really thinking through what is it that you want to achieve, and then make sure you tell the person, the lawyer, or even if you're getting advice from other consultants, this is what I want to achieve. And they
Mhm.
may disagree with you, they may push back, and that's right. But at the end of the day, you've got to tell them what you want so that they can give you the right advice to get you towards your goal.
Mhm. Exactly. So, what would you say is really like the number one mistake that you have seen in business that these, entrepreneurs are making?
Yeah, well, and we've kind of talked about it before. It's around not documenting, what the agreement is between
Mhm.
parties, whether it be at the beginning, if you've got business partners, whether it be when you're bringing on clients, whether it be when you're bringing on team members. Time and time again, we see situations where people, they could have just solved problems before they arose if they just had documented their agreement. And the beautiful thing about documenting the agreement, Candy, is that it actually means people talk about it, because the problem is that they
Mhm.
don't ever actually talk about it. That those business partners that lost $1 million of other people's money, they never talked about where they were taking this property development, and they were on very different paths of where they wanted
Mhm.
to go. And because of that, the whole relationship broke down. If they had just spoken at the beginning about what they were trying to achieve, rather than making assumptions, you know what they say
Mhm.
about assumptions. um, that they would have solved everything. So it's a really simple thing. It's having that conversation, and then making sure that that's put in writing and then
Mhm.
reviewed on a regular basis. Again, that's the same is true with the client. If you've got a client and it's something that's going to be a relationship that's going to be over a year, 3 years, 5 years, again, that will change. People's views on things will change. So put down the basic parameters of what the relationship's going to be, and how it's going to work, so
Mhm.
that when things change, you don't have those problems arise. And that's really the thing that I see, Candy, that is the biggest mistake people make, is that they just assume that everything is going to be okay, or nothing
Mhm.
will change, and they'll just float along in their life. It doesn't happen that way. So yeah,
Mhm.
come to an agreement, put it down in writing, and know that it will change in the future.
Well, and I think while you were talking, I was even thinking that too, when you were saying, well, have the conversation. I was thinking, well, not only have the conversation, but make sure it's actually documented in writing too. And I'm glad that you actually said put it in writing, because a lot of people may have had these conversations and they're verbal and they think they're on the same page, right? And then later on, it might be, 5 years down the line, all of a sudden an issue comes up and one person remembers it one way and another person
Yeah.
remembers it another way. And there's no real way to go back
It's
and say, no, this is how we agreed, because it wasn't actually documented.
Yeah, it's like a car accident. If you and I saw a car accident, Katie, you would have one way that it happened. I would have another way that it happened.
Mhm.
Yeah, and the 15 other witnesses would have a different way of it happening, because we all interpret the world differently, and we
Right.
all see things differently. And so because of that, that means that when we come to an agreement, or we come to an understanding, we're coming to it with our own biases, with our own assumptions, with our own thoughts about how that should work. And
Mhm.
one of the great misconceptions of the law is that people think that it can be black and white. It's never black and white. I remember a friend of mine worked for a judge many years ago, and it always stuck with me that he said, whenever you go to court, you've got your side, the other side's got their side, and the truth is always somewhere in the middle. And the same is true in any agreement that you have. You will have your assumptions, they will have their assumptions, and the truth is in the middle. And acknowledging that means that you'll be able to realize that you need to document everything so that, or at least document the fundamental agreement so that that can't be disputed. And often Candy, people actually document that agreement and realize that they're actually way off on different paths. And so they'll either come to an agreement or they won't go ahead. And that can be a really good thing because it saves people a lot of money.
Right. Figure that out ahead of time. Right. So if there are businesses that are, not just in their own country right now with the global economy, a lot of businesses are able to do business overseas, and there's, like you said, a lot of the rules are similar, but maybe there are some other things that they need to take in consideration. So are there any tips maybe that you would give to someone, to one person that is just in their own country alone versus someone who maybe has relationships, customers, vendors, whatever, in a different part of the world, and how would they handle that?
Yeah, this is becoming a more and more important issue. And so what I'd say is, get advice from your attorney locally, because you want to make sure that you understand the law as it applies to you, and then ask them how the different relationships work. There's this whole area, Candy, of what's called private international law, and it's all about, if I'm contracting with, from Australia with you in the US, and we've got someone in Canada, about how that whole relationship works. That's a whole, it's a whole book that's really, really thick. The people listening to the podcast can't see me put my hand up, but it's a really thick. I did a course on this at university, and there's textbooks and textbooks of this stuff that's written. It's a really complicated area. It's becoming even more complicated. And so, what you want to do is get advice from your local attorney as much as you can. You want any agreement, and again, this is having an agreement in place, to refer back to what law is going to govern the relationship, and make it so you can say, I want the law in Queensland, Australia, to apply to this agreement. Now, does that 100% work all the time? No, but at least it's a starting point. And so, get advice on that early. And if you've got, I have people in Australia who are dealing with matters in America, and even the UK. And I always make sure that they understand we need to get advice from someone over there to make sure that we're doing the right thing. Yes, it's gonna be another cost, but it is truly an investment to make sure that you're setting yourself up properly and don't fall into those problems that we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And if someone has an agreement in place and there aren't any real major changes, obviously we know things are going to change, and that may trigger like a review, but do you recommend like a certain period of time that they say, well, we haven't really looked at the agreements for a while, maybe we should review and update as necessary? Or is it really only when there's like a major change happening, like if a partner is leaving or maybe they're bringing in a new investor or something? What do you say about that?
What I'd say is probably don't think about it in terms of reviewing the agreement, not the actual written agreement, but it's actually, like on a yearly basis, you should be thinking about where you're going and where the business is going. And so I think it's part of that yearly review process where you're asking the question, where am I going? And where is this business going? So at least every year would be my answer to that question.
Okay, perfect. Any other tips or information that you want to share? Like, I didn't think of the question to ask, but you really want to get that information out to our listeners.
I think the main thing is let's just own the fact that we need to be proactive with our legal advice. I've said this before, but this is a big point that I always make when I'm speaking and doing podcasts, is that it's not going to go away. The law is in everything that we do. You can't ignore it. So get the advice, and it will truly set you up for success. And you'll never know the exact amount of dollars that it will save you. I often get asked, well, how much money is this going to save me? And I can't answer that question. And because it varies so widely for different people. But just know from the experience of the people that are around you, and what I've seen and what other people have seen, get that advice early on, and it will certainly save you in the long term.
So true. I know we're coming short on time for today's episode, but I want to make sure that I ask you if you have an offer that you would like to share with our listeners.
I do, Candy. So we've talked about the life cycle on our website, businesslegallifecycle.com. There's lots of free resources that the listeners can see to educate themselves about what they need to do. One of our signature products is a assessment that you can take. So it takes about 10 minutes. You answer 30 questions, and it finds where you are in the life cycle of your business. It tells you what you need to do in that phase. It tells you what you might have missed in the previous phases, and it also tells you what you need to do for the future. The normal price on that is $97. As a thank you for having us on, we have a 50% discount on that, so $48.50. If the listeners go to businesslegallifecycle.com/bizhelp, just as one word, so B-I-Z or Z, we call it Z, you say Z, B-I-Z-H-E-L-P. They'll be able to see the details of that, of how they can claim that offer. And also on the website, as I say, there's lots of free resources that will really help people to understand what they need to do and why they need to do it.
Perfect. And do you want to share any other ways listeners can connect with you, like social media or anything?
The main way would be LinkedIn. If they search for my name, I'm the only one who spells my name that way on LinkedIn. Love to connect with people. You can just send me a note, tell me that you heard me on this podcast, and I'd be more than happy to connect with people. I share lots of great, not just legal, but business content as well, Candy, just because I think that the two are intertwined and necessarily important. So I share lots of great content on there as well.
Perfect. And why don't you go ahead and spell your name too for anyone who's just listening audio wise and is not looking it up right away.
So it's Jeremy, Jeremy, and then Stretton is Streten. And that's a unique way of spelling my last name.
Nice. Well, thank you, Jeremy, for being a guest on my show and sharing your expertise. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Candy. It was a lot of fun.
And I also want to thank the listener for tuning in. So thank you so much. I hope that you found this topic interesting and that it answered some of your questions about the business legal life cycle. If you have any additional questions or comments, be sure to reach out to Jeremy, or you can send us a message at media@abandp.com. And would you please share our show information with those you know? I'd really appreciate your support. I hope you can join us for our next episode, Working with Your Spouse. And please remember you can connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And my website is abandp.com. And you can find the podcast posted on multiple favorite podcast platforms, including iTunes, Google, TuneIn, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. And would you please leave a review on your favorite platform as well? I'd appreciate your support with that too. And until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.